Meet me at the Chazen. I'm your host, Gianofer Fields. As we come to the close of our exhibit, Insistent Presence, Contemporary African Art from the Chazen Collection, it's clear that it not only connects artists and communities across the continent, it also reaches students across the UW-Madison campus. Gabriella Hartlaub is a journalism major, and she says beauty first drew her to Emmy Malley's Virtually Mine. However, the closer she looks, the more she realizes just how much she has in common with the sculpture.
So we're standing in front of an art piece that is called Virtually Mine. A bunch of small, printed glass versions of text messages, and then if you take a step back, it's in the shape of a person. And that's kind of what really struck me about it the first time I saw it. I came up close and I thought it was so cool that you're seeing all these kind of personal messages between two people. But then I took a couple steps back and I was like, oh my gosh, that's in the shape of a person. And I just thought that was so interesting in both its artistic quality of how did you come in and install that? And so it was in the shape of a person, but also in the metaphoric quality of all of our text messages and everything we have in online communication is the sum of our parts, is the sum of our relationships with other people.
What I'm interested in is understanding that connection that you have with this. Was it something that when you saw it, it hit you in that special place, or did it take time for you to understand how this work was affecting you on an emotional level, on a what would you call that? I can't think of the word. Intellectual level? Where did it strike you first?
It struck me on a purely aesthetic level to start with. So when I'm a journalism major, I'm not an art history major. So when I start looking at a piece of art, I'm looking at it firstly for the aesthetic. So it kind of just drew me in because I was that looks really pretty, and I love the way that each little glass picture is suspended from the ceiling kind of. And so it just took me a while to first understand what it was, but then once I understood what it was, it connected with me in terms of just relatability. So I think, and don't quote me on this, I think this is...
Oh, I'm quoting you on this.
Oh my God. I think that this is I think the text messages on the piece are between the artist and her partner maybe, and that was something that I really related to in terms of being far away from somebody and having your relationship be described through text messages. That's something that I've been through personally, and so to see it projected in an art way was something that really struck me on an emotional level, because I was this kind of puts into a physical sense everything that I was feeling when I was going through a similar experience.
Okay, Gabriella, since you've experienced this, how did you feel about reading the actual text messages? Were you able to read them, or did it for you become, because you've experienced it, become this oh, this is a private message, maybe I shouldn't be reading them?
It was more of this is a private message, I shouldn't be reading them. I mean, of course I did, because I'm really nosy, but it was, at first I was I don't know, I may find something in there that I don't like, but I read them and I was just, I don't know, I wasn't really focusing as much on the content of the messages. I was kind of trying to think about what the art meant to me and what it could mean to other people as a whole. So I see the individual messages as kind of a part of a larger whole, and so that wasn't really what I was focused on when I was looking at it. I was more how does the aesthetic work, and also what does this mean in the context of the entire exhibit?
So then in the context of the entire exhibit, where did this then take you? Now that you've had this experience with Virtually Mine, where did it take your heart from there?
I kind of went through the exhibit in more of a linear way, so I kept moving forward. And another thing that really struck me was this large piece that turns, I think it was oil canisters, petro beads. That really struck me next because it was something that I had actually seen in the Chazen previously when I had come through and just seen the normal exhibits. And so I was wait, how does this relate to this exhibit specifically? So that really piqued my interest from across the room.
So then, did it change your relationship with this piece once it was put in the new space?
Yes, because I didn't know the context. I had just seen it upstairs and I was oh, that's really cute, it's pretty. But when I came down here and I saw it like in the context of contemporary African art, and I was able to read more about it. I was like, this isn't just like a pretty piece. Like, this is almost a protest piece to me. And so that gave me a deeper relationship with it, like relating it to a struggle, just gave it a much deeper meaning to me than like, oh, that's pretty, like I'd hang that in my house.
So then when you saw this piece upstairs and it struck you as pretty, when you see it down here, it became a work of protest that had a deeper meaning. What do you think could have been added upstairs that would have taken you to that place when you met this piece for the first time?
I think just putting it in a different area upstairs. So the way that I saw it upstairs, it was kind of like tucked into like a corner. And so it didn't really like draw you in to go and look at it and like look at the tombstone and like get the full story. It kind of just like turned your head for a second and then you like turned back and went through the rest of the exhibit. So I think showcasing it in a context like this, it makes people want to like walk up and be like, oh, wait a minute, what is this doing in this contemporary African art section? And they learn more about it that way. I think like the context that you put art in and what you put different pieces of art around really creates like an experience for the person who's walking through the exhibit, because different things catch your eye and you want to think about the different relationships between these art pieces, and that really like makes you more curious about what does this piece mean and where did it come from.
So then as you're looking at these works and we're walking around the museum, as a journalism major, do you think the way you were seeing objects now, based on your experience in the museum, whether it be this particular exhibit or whether it be a previous exhibitor wandering around in the museum, has it changed the way you approach subject matters in your journalistic work?
I'd say that it has given me a larger respect for different mediums of communication. So you could write a story about, for example, the turmoil that inspired petrol beads, and you wouldn't necessarily put the art perspective into that. You would kind of go and you would interview people and you would use the facts, but what going through this museum and other museums has given me is like a deeper appreciation of how people express themselves in different ways and how equally valuable that is to the way that we express ourselves verbally. So this is something that if I was writing about this turmoil in Egypt, I believe, this is something I would include a picture of this artwork, because this is something that not only can people reading the article connect to, but it's something that expresses how people on the ground are feeling about the situation more so than it would in just a traditional interview. Like, this is the way that people also express themselves, and it deserves to be included in articles and other like journalistic things.
So then as you move forward in your career, because I've already got you working in the most prestigious place possible, I think you deserve it. In your career, as you move forward, do you think you'll spend more time looking before you start writing?
I'm not going to make any promises, but I hope that I do. I hope that I find myself able to do that. Right now, I work mostly doing art stories, and so I spend a lot of time doing that because I'm looking at artwork, I'm watching TV shows and that kind of thing. But I hope to take that into more of like an investigative context, like taking all in when I'm doing an interview, like what is the context of the room that I'm in when I'm talking to this person, like what is the context of the situation. Recently, I was covering a protest that was downtown, and I found that as the protest itself was interesting, what was more interesting was the reactions of people on the sides as the group like walked up Stage Street. Like, the reaction of the people who were inside the stores was equally as interesting as what the actual protest was about. And I think that's something I would have missed had I just had that singular focus on like, what is the news here? Like, something that I've learned throughout my journalism classes is like, you have to focus on what the news is, but I think that taking a much deeper look at everything, going like, okay, it's not only what the news is, it's how people are feeling about it in that moment, is something that is really important.
I'm just so excited about your work, and I'm so excited about the avenues that you're taking, that I want to really draw out of you, not share my delight in doing this, but also draw out of you, like, what makes you so delighted Because your eyes have been sparkling, you've been smiling the entire time. You were so into what you're doing and so delighted by it. Tell me about where that comes from.
It comes from just a just generally, it comes from just a deep-seated curiosity. Like, this is so cliche, but I was always the kid who was asking, like, why is this thing this way? And I have always loved museums. I could spend hours just walking around museums reading every single word that's written there, and it just comes from a deep sense of curiosity. I'm a really empathetic and emotional person, and so I'm always searching for that in other people. I want to understand other people in terms of how they express themselves, what they feel, what experiences they've been through, and I think art is just such a great way to find that, because since you're not necessarily talking to a person, you can so easily see an art piece, understand where the artist is coming from, and also entwine those experiences with your own. And I think that connection of finding the similarities in our experiences is just so amazing, and that's what I want to spend my life doing, just finding those connections between different people and building avenues where we can like better understand each other. And sometimes that takes the form of like writing an article and getting people's perspectives out there, and sometimes that takes the form of just looking at art and being like, this is how this person is feeling, and sometimes I relate to that and sometimes I don't, but to be able to witness another person's thoughts and feelings in this way, I just think is so valuable, and I just love doing it.
You've been listening to Meet Me at the Chazen. Our guest, Gabriella Hartlaub, is a journalism major at UW-Madison. Programming note: this is our last episode of the fall semester. We will return in January with the start of the spring semester and the new calendar year. Meet Me at the Chazen is a production of the Chazen Museum of Art on the campus of UW-Madison in Madison, Wisconsin. For more information about the museum, its collections and exhibitions, visit chazen.wisc.edu. I'm your host, Gianofer Fields. Thank you for listening.
'Cause that's the way we do it around here.